So, as it is right now in Nigeria, the news making round the media is that Rabiu Kwankwaso, the leader of NNPP, the biggest political party in Kano State, has currently been indicted by the US government as one of the sponsors of terrorists in Nigeria. He was mentioned alongside some leaders of Miyetti Allah. Like, it's been causing lots of tension, especially in the north, especially in Kano State. Well, I don't want to quote things out of context. I don't want to add, I don't want to subtract. And because of that, let's watch a Rise News crew in the persons of Rufai Oseni, Dr. Abati, Vimbai, and Ayo as they analyze everything word for word in layman's understanding. Stay tuned as we watch it. I don't want to add anything or remove anything. But honestly, if they really explain Nigeria to you and you understand it, that means the person that explained it to you did not do justice to the explanation. Honestly, because the level of criminality in this country is mind boggling, and most of these are so called leaders. If someone should tell you what they do behind closed doors, you will weep for this country because Nigeria seems to be the only country where criminals are celebrated and elevated while the just men and women out there are being, criminalized, are being punished for speaking up the truth and for standing for justice. It's only in Nigeria that the evil ones gets rewarded constantly. Anyway, I'm not trying to judge or, justify whatever, but I'm just trying to tell you that an average Nigerian leader, an average Nigerian politician is a criminal, and that is on period. Anyway, like I said earlier, I don't want to quote the Arise crew out of context, or I don't want to, contextualize the news. So let's just watch the analysis. But before that, please kindly like this video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't, and if you're new here, you're highly welcome. Please subscribe to the channel, like, comment, and share across the social media. Also follow us across social media at Swift Info Media for more interesting updates on what is currently happening in the country and beyond. Also, do not forget to leave your own thoughts on this matter in the comment section below so we can have more conversations there. See you in my next video, and thanks for watching.
We're breaking here on Arise News, as U.S. Congressmen Riley Moore and Chris Smith have proposed the Nigeria Religious Freedom and Accountability Act of 2026, recommending targeted sanctions, asset freezes, and visa bans against former presidential candidate Rabiu Musa Kwankwaso, the Miyetti Allah Cattle Breeders Association, Miyetti Allah Kautal Hore, and what they describe as Fulani ethnic nomad militia. The bill alleges that the named individuals and groups are responsible for severe religious freedom violations. Shared by Moore on X earlier today, the document outlines statistics and historical accounts of attacks on Christians and on Muslims who advocate religious tolerance. It cites a lack of prosecutions or convictions of jihadist actors, characterizes this as a failure of the Nigerian government, and calls for coordinated support from France, the UK, and Hungary. The report also urges investigation into cases where non-Muslims are allegedly subjected to Sharia or blasphemy laws, and makes reference to victims including Rhoda Jatau and Deborah Yakubu. Now let's take a look at some tweets coming from the United States X space. Sean Nelson said the powerhouse team of Rep. Chris Smith and Rep. Riley Moore today introduced a new bill on religious freedom in Nigeria, increasing accountability measures, including recommendations for sanctions against Fulani militia and former Kano State Governor Kwankwaso, who introduced Sharia criminal law there. Nakabulu responded and said, well, how much were you paid to target and tarnish Kwankwaso's image? Zamfara State introduced Sharia first in Nigeria as part of their right because it's in the constitution of Nigeria. Christians are safer in Kano State than virtually Christian-dominated states in Nigeria. Well, of course, what we do know is that the first governor to introduce and implement Sharia law was Governor Ahmed Sani Yerima of Zamfara State in January of 2000, with other states following after that. Well, could this be a case of mistaken identity? Although we know that the bill itself, the proposed bill itself, doesn't make reference to Kwankwaso implementing Sharia law, but the commentary around it alludes to that. So it's a very huge development, because there have been several threats about naming people and outing people. And I think, I'm not sure whether people would be surprised that the first name on that list would belong to Senator Rabiu Musa Kwankwaso. Dr. Abati, I'll come to you.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, you know, the United States has been interested under President Trump, either in his first term or now the second term, in religious persecution in Nigeria. Ditto, the Department of State of the United States, also the Department of Justice, and also now you have the African Command being involved, with President Donald Trump carrying the flag and saying there is religious persecution in Nigeria. The federal government of Nigeria has made, you know, considerable effort in that direction to say that Nigeria is a secular country, and that whereas there is insecurity in the country, there's no such thing as religious persecution. But so that's the background. And now, over the years, Nigerians have been saying, name the persons. Before now, there was an attempt, I think, by the United States and also the United Arab Emirates to say that there are certain Nigerians in government and out of government who are funding terrorism. I think also under the Jonathan administration, there was some debate about the admittance at a senior level that, in fact, there were saboteurs inside the government. Now we have reached an interesting point whereby the United States House of Reps, Representative Chris Smith, I think he's 73 years old, the two oldest persons in the House of Reps in the U.S., you know, he's been there since 1978, representing the 14th District of New Jersey. And then you have Congressman Riley Moore, also now, you know, proposing a bill, and they are now saying that, one, the United States Congress should declare the Katauri, you know,
Miyetti
Allah Katauri, you know, should declare it a terrorist organization, and also Miyetti Allah itself, which is the principal, you know, home body, should be declared. And then they have now, in that context, named certain persons. And it is the name of Senator, you know, former Governor Dr. Rabiu Musa Kwankwanso, you know, flag bearer in the last general elections of the NNPP that has been mentioned. And then Makban, I think Makban, there's a group called Makban. Fulani ethnic nomads have also been named. Well, this matter has to go before the Congress, and they've indicated penalties that such persons will be declared as terrorists. Such persons will not be allowed to go anywhere near the United States of America. So it's a developing story. The matter will still go to Congress. It will be debated. But what you can say is that with the involvement of both Congressman Chris Smith and Riley Moore, this may be an outcome of the various visitations to Nigeria and the interactions with the Nigerian authorities. But we on our own at this table cannot reach a conclusion and say, oh, these persons, these groups, you know, have been so properly identified. So there will be also negotiations, discussions at the binational level.
Absolutely. Ayo, your take on this
Okay, so
very
this
important
is a
story.
huge story. And it's come up from, there's a journey towards this point, starting off, of course, very significantly, amongst the other things that have happened, that post, that infamous post by President Donald Trump, which then triggered a chain of reaction. Obviously, from the Nigerian end, efforts that have been made to convince the U.S. government that there's no Christian genocide happening has not seemed to yield much fruit, because the conclusion of this bill is is that there is Christian genocide happening. In fact, before we talk about the main thrust of the, the story, which is the naming of some of the people they've identified to institute the Magnitsky Agreement Act, on which includes asset freezing. It's not just visa bans, it's also asset freezing, and also this would have an implication for them beyond the United States of America. In fact, in this bill, some of their partners are mentioned, the United Kingdom, as well as others are mentioned,
France,
and they might,
UK,
France,
Hungary.
some of them might also decide to take on the same action. But I think beyond that is how detailed the reports, about a 12-page bill. The preamble was to give details to the extent of the investigation that they did, including the congressional hearing, the fact that both Christian and moderate Muslims have been killed, the fact that some of them who opposed these things were targeted, were kidnapped, and were killed. So a lot of detail in the work that they did, and then the conclusion around what ought to be done, including the naming of these people. All through this journey, let me call it that, what I've been insistent on is that I wish that Nigeria took the lead on this, because it is quite sad that we're now referring to or depending on the United States to tell us what is happening in our country and what ought to be done. I want to almost say the audacity of one sovereign to interfere in the, in fact, what they've cited as an example is that it's a threat to U.S. national security, and that's why they've taken an interest in this matter. But it should be more of an interest for Nigerians. But I think we can't even begin to decide whether or not there's Christian genocide in the first place before we decide to begin to take action in that regard. So that's my first point. The second point then I would then talk about would be what would be the implication of this naming of these individuals, of these people. I agree with Dr. Bati not to jump the gun, because I would like to understand the reasoning behind, because they didn't actually give a clear reason why he in particular was identified. And I'm glad that you drew in the Sharia law, because they mentioned it in this bill, that the Sharia law, blasphemy law was part of the discrimination against Christians and some people living in this area. So a few things around there. There are nuances, there are contexts that were not contained in this particular bill. But most importantly, what I'm calling for the Nigerian government at this point, can we take a lead on this? If there are indeed people who are killed because of their faith, can we do something about it? Can our senators, and this is where we call the National Assembly, can they do something about it? Their counterparts in the US have gone ahead to present their own reports and made recommendations, and a bill has been passed. Can we do something about it back home? And finally, I'll rest on this point that, most importantly, can we now, they've accused, one of the charges brought against Malami is the fact that he didn't do anything about the list that was brought before him, and making that renewed call, that can we also identify the terrorist financiers or supporters or backers in Nigeria and do something about it?
Exactly.
That's what I would say.
And it's sparking another conversation that we had in the beginning, which is that, is the Nigerian government collaborating with the United States as equals, or are we cooperating, meaning there's some form of coercion happening for us to sort of, agree to the terms that are being set out? Because it does seem like the United States is taking the lead. And the Pentagon, in a related development, the Pentagon is sending about 200 troops to Nigeria in the coming weeks to help train its military to fight Islamist militants. This is weeks after President Trump criticized the country for failing to shield Christians from terrorist attacks. Now, this is according to a U.S. official who spoke on Tuesday. The troops will augment the small team of U.S. forces. You remember we'd spoken about the small team who have been in the West African nation for weeks, assisting local soldiers with identifying potential terrorist targets for strikes using American and Nigerian intelligence. This is what the official said, who spoke on the condition of anonymity and was discussing operational matters. The new troops, whose impending deployment was reported by the Wall Street Journal, will be assigned to locations across the country to provide troop training and technical expertise. The U.S. troops, it is reiterated, will not be involved in combat operations. This is according to the official who spoke on this matter. An exclusive that was released by Wall Street Journal, of course, has now been widely circulated. But, Rufai, just to put these issues together, now we're seeing names, there are lists. Some people are arguing that, why are we nitpicking this one name on the list when there's several governors? If it's about Sharia law, there's several governors who implemented it. If that's the context, what is the context? Give us the detail and give us your evidence as well.
A lot of things have gone awry in Nigeria, and we remember the conversations around when the conversations around Sharia law sprung up, in the early 2000s. And We knew there were going to be a lot of blowbacks, and we're beginning to see the blowbacks now today. So it's not today that we've been talking about this. For what it's worth, those that say, oh yeah, there should be Sharia law in parts of this country, if we also now make the argument that can we also have canon laws in some parts of the country, they will say no, straight away. So we should be careful. Ayo, you asked a very fundamental question. Why can't Nigeria take the lead on it? Because the Nigerian state cannot handle the complicity in this matter. Pure and simple. There's complicity. President Jonathan said it. Dr. Bati, don't lie. President Jonathan said it this time about complicity in the fight against insecurity. This government has also said it. To a large extent, we've not been able to handle the complicity. Till today, we've not answered questions around, number one, Vimbai, who ordered the military to leave 30 minutes before the KB girls were picked up? Look at the case in Kwara. We talked about complicity. When they forwarded the report that these criminals are coming to the security authorities, who informed the criminals that made them get angry and come quickly? Complicity. Secondly, it's because of that complicity too that after the UAE released that list of terrorist financiers, the government can't go after them. So if you have a case of complicity, America will come and write your narrative for you. That's what's happening. It's not that we can't solve the problem of insecurity, but we are not bold enough to solve the problem of complicity. I mean, this was the same country that fought Mitasani in the 80s. So we are not bold enough to fight the complicity that has gone into every single architecture. That's why Americans are taking the lead. And you can never be equals with America. Vimbai, American defense budget is over 800 billion. That's 4 times our national GDP.
Well, I believe that reactions will continue to come in and this conversation will move forward as this is a huge development with regards to our insecurity issues and relations with the United States.